What is the scariest story you know that is true? Growing up in a small town, you hear fragments of local history, whispered references to tragedies that happened decades before you were born, half-remembered details about crimes that shocked community when your grandparents were young. One story that circulated in our area involved a horrific family massacre from the 1930s. A man had murdered his wife, mother-in-law, and 3 stepchildren in a crime so brutal that it became the kind of local legend people referenced but rarely discussed in detail. What I didn't know until I was a teenager was that my own family had been directly connected to this nightmare in the most terrifying way possible. My great-uncle Marcus was just a boy in the 1930s when he and his father, my great-grandfather, went hunting in the woods near our hometown. It was supposed to be a normal father-son outing, the kind of peaceful afternoon that creates positive childhood memories. Their hunting dog suddenly broke away from them, running deeper into the forest while barking frantically at something they couldn't see. Dogs have instincts that humans often ignore, but this behavior was unusual enough that Marcus followed the animal to investigate what had captured its attention. What Marcus found would haunt him for the rest of his life. Hidden among the trees was a burlap bag that looked deliberately concealed rather than accidentally dropped. Curiosity overcoming caution, young Marcus opened the bag and discovered something that no child should ever have to see. Inside was the severed head of a child who appeared to be around his own age. The shock and horror of that discovery would have been traumatic enough for any young person, but what happened next elevated the situation from nightmare to life-threatening terror. As Marcus stared at the gruesome contents of the bag, trying to process what he was seeing, he looked up to find a man standing directly in front of him. This wasn't a chance encounter with another hunter or hiker. This man was holding another burlap bag, clearly containing additional evidence of whatever horrific crime had taken place. Marcus was face to face with the killer, caught in the act of disposing of evidence from what would later be revealed as the massacre of an entire family. The man had dismembered 5 people and was in the process of hiding their remains throughout the forest. The moment must have felt frozen in time. A young boy holding a bag containing a child's head, while the murderer stood before him with more victims' remains, both of them realizing that Marcus had stumbled onto evidence that could lead to the killer's capture and execution. Fortunately, my great-grandfather arrived before the situation could escalate further. His presence scared the killer away, possibly saving Marcus's life since the man had already demonstrated his willingness to murder children. They immediately reported their discovery to local police, who used this evidence to locate the rest of the victims' remains and ultimately arrest the perpetrator. The investigation revealed that the man had killed his wife, her mother, and 3 stepchildren before dismembering their bodies and attempting to hide them in various locations throughout the woods. The killer was executed by hanging just a couple of months later, bringing swift justice to a crime that had shocked the community with its brutality and scope. Marcus only told this story once during my lifetime, and even then it was clear that reliving those memories was deeply painful for him. He never discussed the details of what he'd seen or how the encounter had affected him psychologically. It wasn't until after Marcus died that we discovered the full extent of how this experience had impacted him. While cleaning out his belongings, we found a trunk under his bed containing every newspaper clipping about the murders that had been published at the time. He had kept detailed documentation of the case for decades, suggesting that the experience had never truly left his mind, despite his reluctance to discuss it. The fact that one of the victims was a child his own age probably made the trauma even more profound and lasting. This discovery helped us understand why Marcus had always been somewhat reserved and why certain topics seemed to make him uncomfortable. He'd been carrying the weight of witnessing one of the most horrific crimes in our area's history, along with the knowledge that he'd been just moments away from potentially becoming another victim. The story illustrates how random encounters can change lives forever, and how some experiences are so traumatic they shape a person's entire existence, even when they're never discussed openly.